Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. The Old Haunted House. I used to live in Michigan. The person who owned the house before us was my uncle. Previous to that, it had been a hospital for the Civil War, then it was years later an art museum. When my uncle owned it, he lived there alone, but he easily fixed up the rooms and rented them out to acquaintances. When someone he rented to had money problems and couldn't pay him, or tried to move out with a debt, the upstairs front hall light would dim and lighten, dim and lighten. My mother and aunt were visiting my uncle one day. Upstairs in one of the rooms was two pictures, one of a man and the other a woman. They called these two George and Martha, since they looked like the Washingtons. All day my mother kept telling my aunt jokingly, "Stop flirting with George, Martha's going to get mad." All day she went on and on. When they were leaving, my aunt, the last one walking out of the house, was shoved down the front steps. No one was behind her, and as they turned to look at the door that was left open, it slammed shut. When I lived in the house, I was in the basement one day shooting a BB gun at some cans. As I put things away and started up the stairs, the door shut and locked. Now it only would lock from the kitchen side, so I sat and waited for about 20 minutes, and sure enough, they decided to let me back in. The door unlocked and reopened. I was the only one in the house. A friend was staying over one night. My sister was away at a friend's. This friend of mine came in at about 1 a.m. and woke me up. It seems my sister's alarm had gone off. She must have forgotten to turn it off. I went in and made sure both the alarms were off. After about 20 minutes of sleep, she came back and said it was going off again. This time I went in and unplugged it. 30 minutes later, it was on again. This time I was sick of them and threw it under the bed. It still popped on a little later too. To make matters worse, we had been watching horror movies all night beforehand. I think they wanted attention from this guest. That is not what they got. She left immediately in fear. During summer, we had no form of air conditioning. This house was so large that it was humid and uncomfortable. All we had to do was complain about how hot we were or something, and all of a sudden a cold yet refreshing chill would shoot through our bodies. The most remembered of all was in dream form. I had a dream one night of a young teenage girl. She had long brown hair and was dressed in a long dress. She stood at the end of my bed watching me. After a time, anywhere I slept, she was at the foot watching me. Later, my sister found a picture of what I described in her history book. This was the girl. She had died of some disease at the age of 13 in this house. Another night I had a dream. In my dream, a friend of mine was over. She had come in, this girl with the long hair, and handed my friend a black rose. My friend pierced her finger, and the blood drops turned the ground to a lava-looking form. When I got up in the dream, my feet touched the ground, and I was dressed like this girl. She took my hand and tried to walk me through my floor-length window that was now a great light. My friend grabbed my arm and was trying to pull me back and hold on. I was soon awakened by my friend, my mom, and my sister. I was sleepwalking, and I was headed for the window. About a month later, this friend betrayed me, and never again have we spoken. One other episode. I was young when my uncle lived there. I was playing with my Barbies one day. They were going to the beach, which was the other room. I rolled my car in, and as I unloaded the toy, I heard giggling. I stopped and looked around. I heard more. I turned around, and a little girl my age was sitting in the corner, playing with a rag doll. She looked at me, held up her doll, and said, "Dolly," and disappeared. The Fat Man. When I was smaller, maybe 4 years old, I was visiting my grandmother's house in Ontario. At about 2 in the morning, I was woken up by the noise of someone falling down. Being small, I started to cry and asked for my grandmother. She didn't come, and I was so scared, I got up out of bed, and in an act of bravery, for a 4-year-old that is, I ran down 2 flights of stairs to my grand's room. That's when it got bad. Her door was locked and she wouldn't wake up to answer the door. Then I saw a large object that I called the Fat Man coming down the stairs. It was murmuring about a book it seemed to be looking for. I was scared and I started screaming at him to go away. It turned at me and what I saw then scared the shit out of me. He had no face. It was a blank gray area on its head. No nose, eyes, or other feature. Its murmurings became increasingly louder and it floated hurriedly towards me. I put my arms over my face to protect myself from the ghost. There was a horrifying sound of wood snapping, and whatever it was fell through our wooden balcony on the landing. Later, when I was older, I asked Gran if she ever saw the ghost. No, she said, but a long time ago, a heavy man lived here. He was leaning against the balcony over there when it gave way. Poor man. Fell 3 whole stories, hit the ground like a sack of flour. No one found his body for months as he lived alone and kept to himself. When they did find him, though, his face had completely rotted away. Haunted in Nebraska. In 1974, when I was 6 years old, my family moved from Germany to Nebraska. We had bought a brand new house, so we were the first to move in. I shared a room with my older sister, Kathy. Kathy and I slept in a bunk bed. She had the top. Most of our stuff hadn't arrived yet, so there was very little other than the bed in our room. When we went to bed that night, that's when everything started. The closet door opposite our bed is one of those that slides on a track. We had closed the door before going to bed, but it kept opening up. At first I thought Kathy was doing it to scare me, but she would have had to go in front of me to do it, and I never saw her. We finally yelled for my dad to come into the room and shut the door. When he did, it didn't open up again that night. As we grew up in that house, we'd often hear what sounded like footsteps going up and down the stairs in the hallway, but we knew that there wasn't anybody there to make the noises. Now, as a side note, in the pattern of the wood on the bedroom and the bathroom doors, there is the outline of 2 different faces. One is in Indian. You can see the hair coming down over the shoulders, a nose, a mouth, etc. The other is a goat's head. You can see horns, ears, and everything else. I've shown this to other people, and they can see it as well. Things really started to happen in our house when Kathy moved out and I had the bedroom to myself. One time, I was in the bathroom doing a makeup job on my best friend, Mary, and I was taking pictures at every step to show her the evolution of the makeup job. All the pictures came out fine except one. It was all blurry and you couldn't tell that there was a person in the photograph at all. If you held it one way, it looked like a skeleton head. If you held it a different way, then it looked like a train tunnel or something. I've lost that picture, but did show it to other people before it was lost, and they all agreed that that's what it looked like. Anyways, other strange things have happened in that house. One time I was in the bathroom curling my hair. There is a long mirror in the bathroom that faces the bathtub/shower. I was standing in front of the mirror when I heard somebody call me by my nickname, which is Dot. The voice came from directly behind me and startled me so that I actually turned around knowing full well that there was nobody else in the room except me. Another time, I had a couple of friends over and we were playing with a Ouija board downstairs in front of our fireplace. The little plastic thing started going round and round, and all like it was supposed to, and then it spelled out the word OPP. Nobody knew what that meant. The spirit said that it was a little boy who died very young. We didn't get any other useful information out of it, so we were going to put the board away. Just then, across the floor came 2 black crickets. They weren't chirping or hopping, just walking across the floor toward us. One of the people I was with took off his shoe and used it to hit one of them. The other one took off, but we could never find the one that he hit. You'd think it would have been squashed on the floor, but we never found it. A little while later, I told my mom what had happened. Turns out, her great-grandfather used to live in OPP, Alabama, and had a son that died when he was less than a year old. Very creepy. The strangest thing happened once I had left high school. My half-brother and his girlfriend were staying with us for a while. There were a lot of tensions in our house because of conflicts in the past, and I somehow got in my head that my brother meant to harm us in some way. I was literally scared to be in my own house when he was around. Anyway, I told my sister Kathy, who at that time was married and living 30 miles or so away. She gave me a stiletto knife to keep by me in case anything actually did happen. One night it seemed that everything was coming to a head, like if anything was going to happen, it would happen that night. I was having a lot of trouble sleeping. I'd wake up at any little noise, and then after a while go back to sleep and then wake up again. Finally, at about 7 a.m., I was so exhausted that I fell asleep for what I thought would be a couple of hours. At this time, the room was arranged so that the bed was facing north, right next to the door. I had just gotten to sleep when I felt something touch my left shoulder. It was like somebody had laid their hand on my shoulder. At first it scared the shit out of me, but then I realized it was more of a reassuring kind of touch, like it was saying that everything would be all right. I talked to my other sister about it later that day, and she said that it could have been Jesus trying to comfort me. I don't know about that. My half-brother and his girlfriend moved out a few weeks later. A lot of people may think that being in a house like this would give you the creeps, and that there was no way you'd stay in it, but I didn't and still don't think so. I love that house. I always felt like I was safe there and that I had some sort of guardian angel watching over me when I lived there. I now live in an apartment complex in Colorado, and I don't have any of those feelings there. So was it a guardian angel or some type of ghost? What do you think? Shadow of a man. At this time I was living with my now ex-boyfriend and his best friend in a 2-bedroom terrace house in West Yorkshire, England. We had moved in on a Saturday, and then on Sunday night my boyfriend Addie, his best friend Sean, and another friend James had decided to go out of the town. Sean's girlfriend and I stayed in and watched TV for the evening. Later that evening, the lads piled in a bit worse for wear, and James had a little too much to drink to drive home, so we offered him the sofa. The incident occurred on the following Monday morning. I woke up to the sound of my alarm buzzing loudly with quite a start. As I sat up in bed, the door to my bedroom opened, and a very dark shadow stood in the doorway. The curtains in my bedroom were thick and dark brown, so the room was very dark despite the fact that it was daylight outside. At first I thought it was Sean coming in to wake me up. I thought I had maybe slept through my alarm too long, and it had woken him up, so when he didn't speak I asked, "What's up?" No answer. Then I realized it couldn't be Sean. Firstly, the shadow was far too large to be him. Sean is slightly built, and secondly, he virtually dies when he sleeps, pardon the pun. Then a wave of fear washed over me, and I felt the bed for Addie. He was gone. I watched this thing in my doorway for a few minutes, growing increasingly terrified as I backed up to the headboard. I felt helpless and could not scream or make a sound. I suppose I was too frightened. Then it moved. However, I couldn't quite tell if it had left the room or had moved into the shadow of the wardrobe. It seemed to just melt away. Then I heard somebody coming up the stairs, and Addie walked into the room and flicked the light on. There was nobody else in the room apart from Addie and myself. Addie was obviously concerned about me and said I looked deathly pale. Wouldn't anybody after that experience? I asked Addie where he had been, and he said he'd been to get a drink of water. I asked if James was still asleep on the sofa, and if he had been upstairs, and Addie said no, he'd not move. The house is laid out in such a fashion that if he had left the sofa, Addie would have either passed him on the stairs, or he'd have seen the sofa empty from the kitchen. He'd only seen James sound asleep on the sofa. I told him what had happened, and he went to Sean's room to check on him. He too was asleep. Until recently, I put this to the back of my mind, and had really forgotten all about it. However, since I have remembered a few other things that have occurred to me. The fact that bothers me most is that when the figure left the room, I heard no floorboards creaking and didn't hear anybody in the stairs until Addie returned from the kitchen. The house is relatively old, and the stairs and floorboards do creak, no matter how quiet you try to be. I was always anxious in that house. I never felt at home, but as if I were visiting somebody, and whenever I went alone in the house at night, I felt the need to have all the lights on, and I even slept with the bedside lamp on. I do have a fear of the dark, but I've never been quite that bad before or since. There was always arguments in that house. Addie and I ended our relationship in that house and found it impossible to get on. This may have happened anywhere, but we are now very good friends. Everybody else argued in that house too. Sean fell out with his girlfriend on lots of occasions, and I even fell out with his girlfriend in a big way. Ordinarily, we were very comfortable together and have not argued in such a way since. The figure was definitely that of a man, and it was, without doubt, malevolent. This happened approximately 3 years ago. We lived there together for about 6 months and had no other sightings, but since leaving I have discussed this with others who spent time in the house, and most have said that they always felt uncomfortable there, like they were intruding. It was a very frightening experience, and I'm very surprised that I had not remembered it until this time. I suppose I convinced myself it was my imagination. Whatever, I wish now that I hadn't remembered it, because every time I think about it, all the hair on my body stands on end, and I feel very uncomfortable, to say the least. It's almost like, after all this time, I'm still being haunted. Toy's ghost. I want to share an experience that occurred to my in-laws. This was a little over 8 years ago. They were a darling retired couple in their early 80s. They had recently been forced to put to sleep their aging Pekingese named Toy, short for, believe it or not, Toyota. This dog had been like a child for my mother-in-law, Peggy. She groomed him incessantly and brushed his teeth every morning. Consequently, she took his loss very hard, as did Arthur, my father-in-law. They went to the expense of having him laid to rest in a pet cemetery. Eventually, they began to get over their grief. About 6 months after Toy's death, right around 10 p.m., they heard a dog barking. Actually, it was more like a yipping, common in the smaller dog breeds. Upon investigation, they discovered that the sound was generated directly above where Toy's bed was on the back porch. It was not long in duration, and didn't seem to upset either of them. It seemed they had gotten more of a sense of peace from the experience. The barking incident turned into a regular occurrence at their home. It always seemed to happen just shortly after 10 p.m., which happened to be the time that they had always given Toy his treat, just before they retired for the night. They had numerous guests over, as well as the minister of the church, all of which were treated to the dog's communique. Many of those who witnessed this incident went to great lengths to determine its source. All of them failed to generate any explanation other than that it was Toy. They even tape recorded numerous sessions, which we retained a copy of. This continued for several months. It began to wear on them both, but especially Peggy. The barking had begun to turn to more of a growling and snapping sound. Peggy told us that she feared that Toy was becoming increasingly more angry, as she described it. One evening, right around 10, she went to the refrigerator, and as she opened it, she was hit by a large wind and a very loud, ferocious snarling. It was enough to make her recoil and slam the door shut. She broke into tears and verbally spoke as if the dog were alive in front of her. She tried to explain to him that they had put him to sleep to alleviate the pain that he was suffering from. She continued and told him that she and Arthur loved him and would see him on the other side, but that he didn't live there anymore. The ghostly doggy sounds ceased that very night. They never heard again from their beloved little dog. Several years passed, and they were given a darling little Pomeranian. This pooch expressed one little oddity. Frequently, around 10 p.m., he would stand in the kitchen, facing the back porch, and he would growl and carry on, as if he had seen a ghost. And one wonders, though, whatever was making that growling noise, was that really Toy, after all? It looked at me with one eye. Years ago, I had 2 encounters while I was still living with my parents. The first one was when I awoke on the top bunk of the bunk beds. My younger sister was on the bottom bunk. The beds were behind the door. I opened my eyes from sleep, and someone was there looking at me. I could only see one eye of this thing. The eye was only dark, no color whatsoever. It didn't look like a human eye. And the entire figure that I could see was somewhat translucent, but yet it wasn't. I don't know if you understand this or not. I was young and so terrified that I closed my eyes and wished it away. I really didn't want to see what was the rest of that thing that looked at me with that one dark black eye. The next thing I knew, it was the next morning, and I had gotten up like normal. Just to dismiss this as, well, maybe this didn't happen, sometime later, I had been sleepwalking and my dad retrieved me midway to the basement. Afterwards, I recalled actually looking into the basement and seeing, of all things, strange as it may sound, 4 of these people that I had witnessed previously, and they appeared to be sitting around a table that was not actually there, playing cards. That is what appeared to me, some distance away from them. However, I again felt like there was something evil that would happen to me if I went all the way down to the basement. I can only say that I was very glad that my dad intercepted me before I made it all the way down there. 10 years later, I had been sleeping at a friend's house for the evening, and she had awakened during the night and came to check the house just to make sure everything was okay. And she described a young boy sitting at my feet while I slept. The only way that she could describe this was that he looked at her when she walked into the room, eyes opened, and sitting at my feet. She said maybe this was an angel watching me or something, but that it left a definite impression on her. She did not try to make contact with whatever it was, and she just thought that she should leave it alone. She thought her plies were even playing tricks on her. She even went to get her glasses, came back, and that little boy was still sitting there. I'm not sure if his intentions were to guard me or something more sinister. I guess I really don't want to know about that. Haunted in New Jersey. It was around 1997. I was 20 years old, but all these things started happening many years before. This happened in a house we lived in New Jersey. The house was not really that old. I think it was built in the 1950s. Well, anyway, things started to happen to me at a very young age. I was maybe 5 or 6, and my brother is about 7 years older than me. We were just simply playing together, minding our own business in the living room. I noticed my brother staring at the wall. I looked up to see something. It was as if you were to have taken a small jug of paint and splattered it on the wall facing us, except it had 2 eyes and was watching us play. It did nothing but seem to almost study our movements. Finally, our mother looked in on us. We both, at the same time, looked over at her. She said we looked scared and asked about what did that to us. All I could do was point at the wall, and it was already gone. My father got home from work, and I told him about what had happened as best I could. He told me that he believed that there were things in our house. He said that before I was born, that my Aunt Anna promised in her hospital bed that she would make it to see me born no matter what. She died about 2 days after I was born without seeing me. He said the day I came home from the hospital, they laid me in my crib and walked away for a moment. My father turned back because he had forgotten something in my new room and saw shadows standing over my crib. He said he thought it was my Aunt Anna. But was it? A few years went by. I was finally around 8. My brother and I had gotten into a fight because we both shared the same room. So our parents separated us. My brother, Jimmy, got his own room downstairs, and I got to keep the old room. Well, not too long after that, I had been asleep, and I woke up very late for no reason. I walked into my parents' bedroom. I saw them both sleeping. I then walked over to my mom's side, the side which is closest to the door. I walked over and just looked down at her. I looked up at the far wall, facing their bed, and I saw one orange glowing eye, just hovering about 2 feet away from that wall. I did not get scared, nor did I even panic. I walked over it to see if it was real. I passed my hand through it. It was like a human eye, but with odd colors. The white of our eyes was orange and the darker circle brown. I stood behind it, and it vanished. I crawled into bed with my parents. I still can't remember being scared, but I wanted to be by them that night. As the months went by, my brother complained about his room. He couldn't sleep in it. He didn't know why, but he just couldn't. My mother basically told him to suck it up. It's your new place. You have to try and adapt, she said. Now, almost every night, I heard bumps and creaks. As I drifted to sleep, my light would turn on and off by itself, which grew to be a problem. I was pretty afraid of the dark as it was. Things would get broken, and no one could figure out who or what did it. When I was around 11, I finally sucked in my pride and went to my mother about these things that went bump in the night. She said I must have been imagining it. She said that I drank too much soda at night, so my caffeine levels were basically playing with my mind. A few months later, my mom and dad decided to kill off our basement stairs, just knock them out, cover up the hole, and finish the basement as a small place to rent out. They wanted to cut out a piece of floor in our living room and make brand new stairs. I didn't mind so much. I just thought that it would just be a little bit of extra noise to put up with. Well, I turned 12 and they were just about done with the new basement. I wonder sometimes if this small construction site bothered all the things in the house, because after that, bad things began. One day, I had just finished a great night's sleep and opened up my eyes. I tried to get up and something had me pinned to my bed. I couldn't see it, but it held me down. I became scared. I shut my eyes again. I began to think why this was happening. I felt something right above me, holding me, but I couldn't see it. I opened my eyes again with all my strength. I sat up, but this time it was gone. In the wink of an eye, the feeling vanished. I went downstairs and continued as if nothing happened. I didn't dare mention it to anyone. My mother never believed me in the first place. My father seemed to be getting sick of hearing me whine about these things, and my brother made fun of me as it was. Why add to that? A few months went by, and summer came along. My parents came to my brother and me and told us one Saturday that we were going to the beach the following day. The beach was a big thing. We lived an hour and a half away. We never really went there that often. Our parents told us to go to bed early so we could get up at 5 a.m. to start the packing. I was so excited that night. I watched TV in my room until midnight. I still wasn't very tired, but I figured that I needed to sleep. I turned off my TV and went to go and turn out the lights. I lay down in my bed. My head rested not 5 feet from my door. Almost directly above me was my light switch in case of emergencies. And then I came into contact with my first horrible presence. As I began to drift away, a voice began talking. It sounded like a man speaking almost directly into my ear. He started telling me that I was evil, and he was going to take me to hell with him. He said that I did not deserve my parents, and they did not deserve a whiner like me. He went on about dragging me with him and how bad I really was. About 10 minutes later it stopped. I was so terrified. Nothing can come close to explaining that. I was so afraid to open my eyes while he was talking. I didn't want to open them and find out that it wasn't a prank of my brother's, that nothing would be there. After about 5 minutes, I got up the guts to make a break for the light switch. I flipped it on and looked around my room to find nothing. I was so scared I ran into my parents' room. I looked down the stairs, afraid to go down them, but I saw nothing but blackness. I went back into my parents' room and woke them to ask if they had been in my room talking to me. They said no. Now go back to bed and stop drinking so much soda. I went back to bed, but never turned off the light, and I didn't fall back asleep until 4 a.m. From then on till around 2 more years, these major things stopped. It went back to the bumps in the night deal again. I thought I was over the worst. When I was 14, about a month after middle school had started, I was in 7th grade by then. My parents had my brother and I adopt 2 puppies because our older outside dog, Lou, had died. So we went to the shelter and ended up getting our new pups. My brother ended up getting rid of his puppy. After a long time, we couldn't get his dog to stop chewing things up, so we gave him away to the family of friends in the other town. But my dog, Furry, she's a mixed with Toy Collie and Samoyed, was still here to stay. The basement was totally redone now. It was great. We got wall-to-wall carpeting. It had a bedroom, small kitchen, a little TV room, and half a bathroom. And my parents all did it by hand. This now turned out to be a really cool hangout spot. As you walked down the new basement stairs and got to the bottom, you could peek around the door and see the new den. If you turned around, you could see where my parents put the washer and the dryer. If you continued looking, you would see my parents made a small crawl hole in the wall facing you. It went far, far back into the wall. It was perfect for our Christmas lights. My parents were big on Christmas. We were the talk of the town. Furry always stayed down the stairs. She would do nothing but lay at the top of the stairs and watch. Well, my brother was way older now, 21 I believe. He had a good auto parts job and he was a manager. He offered my mom rent so he could live downstairs. So he moved downstairs in a day. He would stay out all night long and come home in the early morning. I figured he was out partying all night. No problem for us. He ended up getting a birthday present from his girlfriend. It was a different puppy. Her name was Moonshine. Yes, my brother is a half hippie, and Moonshine is a mix of white lab and German shepherd. Moonshine also wouldn't stay downstairs unless someone was with her. Well, my birthday came along and all I had asked for was a nice gold chain. My mom actually got it for me one day. I took it off and laid it on my desk as I was cleaning my room. I turned around and it was gone. Not 2 seconds later, I was mad. It was something that I knew my mom had saved her pennies to get me, and I knew exactly what had happened. I spoke out, this time in anger. Give it back or else. My mom works damn hard. Who do you think you are, huh? This is mean. I want it back now. I'm going to turn my back, and by the count of 10, I want it back where it was, or you will surely pay this time. I turned around and counted. I heard nothing. I turned back around and looked at my desk, and it was exactly where I had laid it. I went to sleep happily that night thinking I had won the war. Little did I know that it was only a small battle. I woke up the next morning. Frost that had melted and turned to very small beads of water were on my window. On my window the words, "I sorry," were written in the water. I was then freaked out again. This time one of these things actually communicated. But it was nice. Like it was playing a prank or trying to be funny. It knew I had gone too far. When I calmed down, about half an hour later, I went back to my room and talked out loud again. I told it that I didn't mean to get so harsh, but other things have been mean to me here, and that it was just a very personal object. And I told it to please not do that again. And I appreciated very much that it did in fact return it. Not too long after that, my brother moved out. I was ready to go into the 9th grade, and things were back to normal, kind of, just normal shadows, the bumps, nothing new. My brother then moved down to Florida. I figured that now was my chance to take the really cool basement apartment. I asked my mom and she gave the okay. I began the move. I got a good majority of my things down there. My TV, my phone, computer, some posters, etc. My brother left his waterbed, which was a major plus. I got ready to settle in for my first night down there. I got ready for bed and left the kitchen light on because it made me feel better. I lay down and snuggled into the waterbed. All of a sudden, the kitchen light shut out. I figured the bulb went. Before I got the energy to get up, I heard whispering, as if you were walking down the hall of your school and people were talking about you. It sounded like it was coming from the kitchen. I panicked. I turned on the bedroom light. I then went into the small TV room and turned on that light and saw nothing. The hair on my arms were raised up. I had large goosebumps everywhere. And suddenly I knew I had a very bad presence around me. I talked out loud. I asked if it was the one that was in my room so much. I got nothing but silence. I asked if this was a prank. Silence again. I asked what it was, and all the lights went out as if it was going to show me exactly what it was. And instead, I ran out of the basement. I went up the stairs and slept in my room that night. I then went into full research. I bought every book I possibly could on the paranormal and how to get rid of it. I spent my daytime in the basement. My nights were in my room. I then started sleeping with my door closed. I now know why the dogs won't go downstairs by themselves. I have a friend who I've known since preschool. His mom was very knowledgeable about spiritual matters. She gave him some ideas on how to help me out. He brought over some incense and an open mind. He walked into my basement for the first time in his life, and I saw the hair on his arms raise up. He just looked at me and told me that he thinks that it doesn't like him very much. I said that it didn't seem to like anyone very much. I said, whatever it is, it's kind of cranky and pushy to me, and as I said that, the bedroom light exploded even though it wasn't even on. My friend burned the incense, and the spirit left for a while. He told me to burn it when it was around. He also told me to read up some more, that he would give me some books on how to deal with this thing. Time went by, and I read up and I learned how to meditate. It got to the point that I was able to communicate somehow with whatever was there. The first thing that I communicated with was the presence that seemed to love my room. What I saw was a small boy around the age of 9 or so. He apologized for taking my necklace that one time. He then explained that it was okay, that I had simply lost my temper. He then totally changed the subject. He wanted to talk to me about the others, he said. He told me about the men living next door to one another. He didn't know why, but they bothered him a lot. He said that they make fun of him often, so he likes to stay away from them. He also made the mistake of going to the new place downstairs. He said that the old man tried to practically kill him. He ran back up here. He said that my room was the best for him, and that I didn't seem to mind him there as long as he didn't play another joke. I told him that he was very welcome in my room, but why was he there in the first place? He told me that he loved it until the others came. He used to run around all day. I tried to convince him to follow the bright light, but he refused under all circumstances. I had to give up on him. I tried talking to the men who live across from one another, but they don't want to listen. All I hear when I used to talk to them was shh, so I gave up on them also. But now it was time to break out the big guns. I went downstairs, and Fur the dog tried to follow me. I had to tell her several times to stay before she listened. It felt like she knew I was going to do something dumb, and she wanted to be there just to help out. I was honestly scared. I hugged her. She was my relief source. I began my walk down the stairs. I went down the door and left it open behind me. I sat down in the chair in front of the TV. From there, I looked to the left and saw the darkness of where I just walked from. Even though it was daytime, it was still very dank and dark down there. I started thinking about what I was going to say to this one. I was holding one of my ghost books. I began to tell him, her, or it how I really wanted to get along with it, but how they need to give me a chance. All of a sudden, from the corner of my left eye, I saw something. I turned my head and glared out the door to see a large ball of green light growing brighter. I was automatically stopped from speaking at that point. I froze in total fear. It grew and grew until it was almost all green light over there, and then it died out. I was so scared I just walked up the stairs and ran to the TV room up there. It seemed that it knew what got to me. All this time of scaring me out of there, I think it knew exactly how to shut me up, and it worked perfectly. I gave up on talking to whatever was down there in the basement that day. I had to reorganize everything now. I needed a new strategy. Nighttime came along, and it was getting pretty late. I was up in my room reading my books. I got hungry, so I went downstairs for a snack. My mom had fallen asleep in the little sewing room we had. There was a small yet extremely comfortable cot in there. I walked down the stairs. I never turned on the lights. I went through the kitchen and began getting a paper plate. I heard footsteps come up the stairs. I honestly thought that my mom was down there doing laundry or something and came up. I went to the fridge to get everything. I heard the footsteps go into the kitchen directly behind me. I heard the chair pull out that was directly near the back wall. It smacked against the wall. I heard someone sit as if they were very tired. I turned around to say something to my mom, only to see nothing there. My heart jumped into my throat. I turned back around and realized it was what I thought now was a man, the one in the basement. I left everything where it was and quickly walked past the kitchen into the bathroom in the hall. I left the light on. After about 3 minutes, I heard him get up, push the chair back in, and walk towards the bathroom, stopping directly in front of the door. I waited for anything. For some odd reason, I grabbed the plunger as if it could help me at that moment. After a minute or so, it kept walking down the hall, went into the room where my brother used to be, and closed the door behind him. I ran upstairs and tried talking to the little boy, but he was gone now. He never returned either. I don't know what happened to him. The next morning, I told my mom what had happened. She said she slept downstairs because she thought she kept hearing footsteps. She decided to wait and see if someone had broken in, but no one was ever sighted. I explained to her everything about what I had been doing. For the most part, I think she thought I was crazy, but I know that there were some things that she believed. I then told her that I was going to stay at my friend's house for the weekend to get my thoughts back. As I got older and went through high school, I became an amateur ghost hunter. If my friend thought that they had a ghost, I'd research and see if I could find anything. I'd go through their house to see if anything was there. My house stayed the same. There was a point where one of my aunts and a cousin of mine were in the basement with me. I began telling them all of this. My aunt got scared and asked if the man was still there. I said, yes, and he's still mean and rude. I had a framed picture hanging next to the door. It literally blew up while none of us were even touching it. We all ran upstairs. There were many times where I had a pack of cigarettes down there and I would lay them on the TV. I'd turn around and they'd be gone. I'd look all over, behind the TV, in other rooms, and all but no sign. I would get pissed and say out loud that I would count to 10. I tried that old technique. Well, it would kind of work. Although I would turn around and sometimes by the count of 7 they would fall in front of me or something appeared right where they were supposed to be. One time he threw them at me and hit me in the head. Now that I live in Florida, my brother tells me about how when he was in that hallway room that he could never go to sleep because he would either hear talking and he would see shadows even in the day. He told me that when he moved to the basement that an older man would stare at him. He would be dressed in a black suit. He said he looked like a scary dude. He would peep his head in the bathroom as he was trying to use it. He then decided to go out all night and not return until dawn. It seemed to be better in the daytime. At least I know that I was not crazy. Many friends slept over my old house, and I would forget to warn them about the things that have gone on. I would wake up in the morning with them lying either right next to me, cuddled up, or on the ground beneath my feet. Believe it or not, I believe those ghosts, and especially the one in the basement, are still roaming up in that house in New Jersey.